Are you curious what's going to happen with the Bard in the new Player's Handbook? Well, you're in luck, because behind today's secret door, what's in store for Bards? And some of it you won't believe. So behind today's secret door, what's in store for Bards in 2024? This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. All right, before I get started, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And my thanks to Marcelo, Doug, and William for your support. Okay, I think this video is going to be relatively short. It's based on the interviews with Jeremy Crawford. I've done a few of these so far. What is interesting is that there is one entirely new subclass for the Bard. Now, because this is an entirely new subclass, I'm going to try and reserve my commentary on that subclass and keep it to a minimum. I'll certainly go over it and what Crawford discussed, but I'm going to not go in depth about what I think about that until I see it all laid out, because it's an entirely new subclass. All right, so before I get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, let me just take a moment here, because I think in this particular class, it is more evident than in any of the others that have come before it. I have heard Crawford make comments. I'm trying not to be too overly critical of Jeremy Crawford here. I have no real, I think 5th edition was magnificent, and I have every reason to expect that what we're going to get in the new Player's Handbook is going to be great. However, there are comments that he will make that simply flabbergast me. And these are really more about from the point of view of an optimizer. And I realize that game designers don't often think, strangely as it is, they don't often think as optimizers. I've worked with a legendary game designer, and that man did not think in terms of optimization. So you can be brilliant at game design and not be thinking in terms of optimization. But it bugs me when he's promoting power levels, which is clearly what he's talking about beefing this up and this is stronger now and da-da-da-da-da. And he's clearly doesn't have perhaps as firm of a grasp as to what is powerful and what is not. And it will be evident in 2 of the 4 Bard subclasses. Okay, so first we'll go over the general changes to the core class of the Bard, and then we'll go through the subclasses as he discussed them. First up with general changes is that the Bard spell list has been beefed up. And I hate using air quotes, but what that means, I don't know. Does that mean that the spell list is more expansive? Does that mean that there are stronger spells on the Bard spell list? The Bard spell list was already really good. So whether it's that there's some stronger spells on there or there's a higher volume of spells, either way, that's great news for Bard players. As with many of the other casters, a Bard will now be able to change a cantrip when they level up. There's been a change to inspiration, Bardic Inspiration now. It will last up to an hour. That's a nice change. I understand the reasoning for it. I mean, it's fine. It's good. An hour is certainly better than it was before. So more good news for the Bard. There's a lot of good news for the Bard. When we get to Font of Inspiration, there is a interesting addition to that, and that is that a Bard will now have the option of sacrificing a spell slot to gain, Crawford didn't mention this, but I looked it up in the D&D Beyond article, it is 1 inspiration dice, 1 Bardic Inspiration dice for 1 spell slot. Now, with many Bards, I would not think that that's a very good trade. But there are some bards where that is a heck of a trade. Counter Charm has now been changed. It will now be a reaction that will allow a creature, presumably an ally, that is frightened or charmed, for you to be able to give them a save. And I think I got this right from him as he was describing it, that you are allowing them to make another save against that condition with advantage. I might not have heard that clearly. It wasn't very clear to me, but the best I could piece out is that's what Counter Charm does. One way or the other, it's certainly better than what Counter Charm was before. That was certainly a rather meh ability for the Bard before. And then we get to Magical Secrets. So there's two really big changes to Magical Secrets. First of all, the spells that you'll be able to pick from for Magical Secrets has been restricted down to Bard, Wizard, Cleric, or Druid. So no more raiding the Paladin spell list or even the Warlock spell list. Those are off the table, Ranger, whatever. They're all off the table. Sorcerer, whatever. They're all off the table except for those four. This is not that big of a restriction, quite frankly. If you were wanting to go find Greater Steed from the Paladin spell list, that was a popular thing to grab with Magical Secrets. Certainly a lot of fun to pick it, but there's plenty of great spells to pick. The big change now is that when you receive Magical Secrets from that point forward, as I understand what Crawford was saying, is that your spell list is no longer just the Bard spell list. Your spell list is, for all new spells known, is the Cleric, Druid, Wizard, and Bard spell list. You can pick from any of those from 10th level forward. That is stunning. I had to listen to this several times. Now, part of me hopes that I'm wrong about that because of how crazy that is. No other character can do that. For the Bard to be able to have that kind of command of magic from 10th level forward is a daunting thing, but then I remind myself that we are talking about a 10th level ability, and in a lot of campaigns, once you hit 10th level, you've got a few levels to go pretty much before the campaign ends. So certainly an amazingly powerful change to Magical Secrets. I haven't even been able to process exactly how a Bard will play at that level. It's crazy. Then we get to Superior Inspiration. This will now allow you to get an inspiration dice back if you have fewer than 2. Now, that sounds like a really great deal, and it is, but this is definitely proportionately useful to the amount of encounters you're going to be playing in a day. If you're playing in the standard 3 encounters a day, or what is the norm, I don't want to say standard, but what seems to be about the norm for 3 encounters a day, then that's not going to be all that big of a whoop. But if you're playing in 6, 7, 8 encounters in a day, and there are dungeons where that can certainly happen, but we're talking about more of a rare instance. But in those instances, being able to recover Bardic Inspiration at that pace is going to be noticeable and useful. Pretty useful. But overall, I would say it's generally, it's okay. I mean, we're talking about a very high level ability here. And at level 20, they will get Power Word, Heal, and Kill on their spells known list. And then when they cast those spells, they will be able to target an additional target. I would have to see if they've made any changes to Power Word, Kill. Power Word, Heal, obviously very useful, being able to target 2, very, very strong. But we are talking about a 20th level ability here. So, okay, I mean, it seems to me, from a power level standpoint, it seems fine. I'm not bowled over by it. It's certainly thematically very cool, though. So those were the changes for the core class of the Bard. Now getting into the subclasses, we have the new subclass of Dance. The College of Dance Bard will get an unarmored defense. Obviously, that's always a nice option, and certainly very thematic and very well suited for role playing. Now, in addition to this, at the same level here, when you use a bardic inspiration dice, and that now there are going to be expanded ways that inspiration can be used. There's going to be reaction-based uses that the different colleges will have. I don't know if they're still called colleges. I assume so. But regardless of how, once you use a bardic inspiration dice, you will be able to perform an unarmed strike. Now, because of the changes to unarmed strike, that will mean you could do damage, you can initiate a grapple, or you could shove. If you were to elect to do damage, the damage die you would be rolling for the unarmed strike would be your bardic inspiration dice, and this would be in addition to your dex modifier. At 6th level, they'll gain the ability when an enemy ends its turn within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to use a bardic inspiration dice to allow you and your one ally to, if they're within a certain range of you, to move half of your movement. And of course, because you're using a bardic inspiration dice here, you would be able to perform that unarmed strike. Having that kind of mobility for any class, any kind of full caster, is obviously great. So obviously a very solid ability. Then they gain an ability called Tandem Footwork, where they will, when initiative is rolled, and I don't think he mentioned that it would be a reaction. I assume it would have to be. When initiative is rolled, you can use a bardic inspiration die to add that roll to you and your allies' initiative roll. Now that's crazy good. And then they will gain evasion. Evasion is obviously a great ability. They get a little bonus to their evasion in that if you are caught in an evasion scenario, meaning a area of effect or what have you, then you can grant that evasion ability to an ally. And again, I don't know what the range of that would be, but he simply says an ally. Obviously, it would be somebody within that area of effect. So overall, it's fun to get a entirely new subclass, and one that is, Crawford had mentioned that they had wanted to put this into the game for quite a while. I can see why. It is certainly, it feels I don't want to use the term iconic. There's certainly going to be a number of players out there who, when they are playing a bard, would like to be playing a character like this, a dance bard. So cool, very cool. And then we get to Glamour. Now, the Glamour Bard was already one of the strongest character classes in the game. If you were wanting to play a controller character, you couldn't really do much better, if you could even do better, than the Glamour Bard. So the fact that it's getting help at all is mind-blowing to me. Now, I don't want to get too overboard with this because it's very possible that there could be some minor nerfs in some of these abilities that he just simply didn't mention. But if the Glamour Bard plays as it did before with simply the changes that I'm mentioning now, then oh boy. The Glamour Bard, I would have to say, from the character classes that we've heard, so just from what we've heard so far and what we know so far, the Glamour Bard would have to be one of the very tip-top character class choices in terms of total power level. And again, I'm saying this without knowing what the spell lists are. I'm having to make a lot of assumptions here. So it could very well be that when I get the player's handbook and I see everything, that they come down. But if the bard got help with the spell list, if the spells play relatively as they did before, this is going to be amazing. This will put the Glamour Bard in the S+ tier. So the first thing they get, the first big boost they get, is Beguiling Magic, and this replaces Enthralling Performance. What the Glamour Bard will get now is they will have always prepared. He's used the term prepared spells known, I guess. For the Bard will always be Charm Person and Mirror Image will be added. Now, Mirror Image is a great spell. Charm Person in previous editions was a good spell. In this edition, it's been So we'll see what it looks like in the player's handbook. But simply getting Mirror Image as a bonus is a big get. But that's not the real big deal here. The big deal is that whenever the Glamour Bard casts a enchantment or illusion spell, they can target someone that saw them cast that and either charm or frighten them. We don't know if there's a save. I assume there must be a save, and we don't know what the duration of that would be. If it's a one-turn kind of a duration, obviously that mitigates the power level of this. If it's one of those situations where they are getting a repeated save until they save, then this is insanely powerful. Now, they'll only get a limited number of uses of this per day, but just think here, something like Mirror Image is an illusion spell. You may not be as inclined to cast Mirror Image as a bard, but now, if you can cast it and debuff someone in the same round with the same action by giving them the frighten condition, even if it's just for that round, it mitigates the cost of casting Mirror Image. Conversely, think about things like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, an enchantment spell. Now Tasha's Hideous Laughter, single target spell, great spell, single target spell, but now you get a bonus. For your first level casting of Tasha's Hideous Laughter, you can also give the fear effect to somebody else. This is going to be, if it's just a one round effect, it's really strong. If it is a save until they save effect, then this is insanely powerful. Now, when we get to Mantle of Inspiration, he talked about it rather vaguely, but this is the thing. This is the thing that makes the Glamour Bard so insanely powerful. And this got a bump. I don't know how big of a bump. I don't know relatively how big that bump is because it's a bump to the temporary hit points that it grants. Simply increasing them at all is nice, but it's also true that he had said in another video that healing effects were going to all be bumped up. So the relative value of temporary hit points, and temporary hit points are still going to be very good, but the value of temporary hit points will be in proportion to the effect that healing spells are more powerful. But nevertheless, like I said, even if they got really, really bumped up, temporary hit points are still going to be valuable. But the temporary hit points were never the big deal to me anyway with Mantle of Inspiration. It was the reaction-based movement and the fact that it targeted up to your charisma modifier. Now, this is where we talk about spending a first level spell slot to get a dice back for that is an unbelievable deal, especially once you are 5th or 6th level. You'll be able to burn those to get those Bardic Inspiration dice, but you really aren't going to necessarily need to do that too much. But if you wanted to, if you needed to, you could. This will allow the Glamour Bard to have so much control of exactly how things are going to play out on a battlefield that it's mind-blowing. There is no other character class that can really do what the Glamour Bard can do just like that and do it over and over and over again throughout the day. So this is my point. I think the power level of Mantle of Inspiration was already great. And maybe simply it needed to get a temporary hit point bonus because everything else was inflating. That's fine. But to give them beguiling magic and that effect and be bumping this as well, with an already great, what was already great, is where I just wonder if they're just looking strictly at the polling data. The Glamour Bard didn't need a scrap of help, and it got 2 big spoonfuls. There are 2 other minor bumps that the Bard gets. When they get Majesty, they will always have the command spell. Again, he's using the term prepared. I would think that means that it's a spell's known, but maybe they've just changed all the terminology at this point. And then finally, when we get to Unbreakable Majesty, the first time a creature hits you, they have to make a saving throw. And if they miss that saving throw, they miss. This is a minor bonus. It's certainly a solid one, Again, it didn't need any help, in my opinion, but it's getting it at every step. When we get to the Lore Bard, when he talks about magical discoveries, he's a little bit vague here. So this is tapping into magical secrets, right, at 6th level. So what he says is that you'll be able to change those spells that you got from magical discoveries whenever you level up. If you leveled up and wanted to change that spell to a different spell, provided it's on those lists, you can. What's unclear to me is if that means that you can pick new spells from a higher level. This is a minor point because we're really just talking about a 4th level change, you being able to pick 3rd level spells. Now, when you hit 7th level, could you swap one out and grab a 4th level spell? It's unclear to me, but it's clearly a nice little bonus for the Lore Bard. The Lore Bard was obviously super solid. Great class. And then with the Lore Bard with cutting words, they will now affect creatures that have the charm, that are immune to the charmed condition. So again, nice little bonus. And with Peerless Skill, a bardic inspiration that was given, if it wasn't successful, you don't lose the dice itself. So again, a nice small little bonus. But if you compare, already I would say the Glamour Bard was S tier. I would put the Lore Bard at A plus tier. Now granted, this is just my perspective of this. This doesn't mean that I'm absolutely right about this, but I think I'm pretty darn clear right about the Glamour Bard being S. You could argue that Lore was already S, but to me, being able to do things that nobody else can do is a big, big deal, and the Glamour Bard got that. So if we compare the bonus that the Lore Bard got versus the bonuses that the Glamour Bard got, and I thought, in my evaluation, Glamour Bard is at least better than Lore, even though they're both super strong. It's crazy to me that Glamour got as much help as it did, because we see what kind of help they gave to a class that they thought was already super strong. Now, when we get to the Valor Bard, there are 2 different changes that were discussed. One is that martial or simple weapons for the Valor Bard will be able to be used as a spell casting focus. That's certainly nice. The other with the Valor Bard, and again, they thought Valor Bard was super solid. The Valor Bard gets a bonus here, and it is potentially a really good bonus, but this is one of the 2 classes that this is the one that gives me trouble with their thinking. Now, when the Valor Bard gets the extra attack feature, they will have the ability to use a cantrip in place of one of the attacks. Now, that's undeniably a solid, good ability. Here's my problem, though. This is really going to depend on how the mechanics finally look when we see it. But this has the potential for a trap all over it. And it might be and I'm sure it is. If it is a trap, I'm sure it's an unintentional trap. But the Valor Bard was never something that you picked because you wanted to play something that was martially competitive. So an addition like this certainly leads you to the idea, well, that's a really super ability. And it is, if you can make the class martially competitive. So we'll have to see. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it is a trap. I'm just giving you an alert. If you like Valor Bards, don't get too excited about this just yet. You're going to have to build it out to see what kind of numbers you can put up if you're wanting to play the character as a martial character that can cast. This kind of an ability, if the character class already had enough of the bone structure underneath it to allow it to be martially competitive, this is the kind of feature that could put it over the top and make it great. But I don't even know that it can pull it up to average. We'll just have to see. The spell list that the bards get may change that. There may be ways that a Valor Bard will be able to be martially competitive. But if I were to play a Valor Bard, I would be wanting to play it simply to pocket the armor and the shields and the great Bard spell list and just play the Bard. And just play it as a caster who has armor. And for that reason, the Valor Bard is solid. It is, but not, at least in its previous incarnation, martially, it wasn't, if we're just talking about the straight up class itself. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast bless on all of you.